Hi there, I'm Bart Weiss. I'm the director of the Dallas Video Fest, and we're doing these Google Hangouts to give you an opportunity to get to meet some of the filmmakers we have at the festival and hear about some of the great films that we have. What we're going to talk about today is just an incredibly fun and wonderful film. The film itself has these great characters and this great subject matter, but given what's going on in the world scene, it really takes on a very different kind of context to it. So we have the filmmaker who's in Michigan at the moment, showing the film at other festivals. And BJ, are you there?
Yep.
All right. So BJ, what would be your one-line description of the film?
Well, Havana Motor Club is about the community of underground drag racers that exists in Cuba today, and their fight to legalize racing and to hold the first official car race since the Cuban Revolution.
Yeah, I mean, the characters are magnificent, and I have to say the cars are magnificent. It's like you've got these guys and they're working on their cars, but their cars are each one of them is so unique, and you get the sense of, it's like when you think of Cuba, you think of color, you think of, the beach, you think of the ball, you think of this, and you think of old cars, right? And so some of these are some of the images you have, but we kind of get to meet the cars as well as meet the characters. So how did you get interested in this film? Where did you sort of hear about it, and how did you sort of get going on it?
Yeah, well, I do think that cars themselves take on their own persona, and everyone always says that Cuba has been stuck in time for the past 50 years, but if you lift up any of these hoods, you see a very dynamic system and car parts from all over the world, from many different eras, and to me that represents Cuba as well. I've been going to Cuba since 2000, and everyone's always like, well, what is it like? It's still stuck in the 50s, right? And it's a very highly evolving society, and I've always been fascinated by the society and by this country that's only 90 miles away from us, but up until recently was pretty much completely off limits. So I started going there in 2000 and ended up going many different times over the course of several years, and got to know the place, and ended up getting a grant to write a script that's set in Cuba. And so I lived there for about 4 or 5 months in 2008, and that's when I really got to know the place. And I met this Russian filmmaker who was doing a fiction project in Cuba. And he had asked me to do a making of his film, which I thought was a great way for me to get to know how a film gets made in Cuba and get to know a Cuban crew. And sadly, in his case, it actually was a way to see how a film gets unraveled, because within two weeks of his production, it got shut down by the government. And I had to make a choice whether or not to stay or just go back to New York. And
okay, stop for a second. Why did that get shut down?
Well, many reasons. I think there was a lot of in-house fighting with the Cuban Film Commission about who was going to produce it and who was going to work on what. And then there were rumors going around that it had something to do with the child pornography, and which was ridiculous too, because I mean, the main character, he worked in a place where there was prostitution, but there was no, that it was just the circumstances of his job. But I think, it's very hard for foreigners to do business in Cuba in many ways, including a film. And it took him a year to get a permit in the first place. And so when some of the film commission people thought that he wasn't following the script that he had written, they decided to shut it down. And then I think he could have revived it, but then his investors got cold feet, and so unfortunately it was never made. Which was, I guess, good for me, because what happened was I went to this random car event right before I was going to go back to New York, and they were celebrating the kidnapping of this Formula One racer who had been kidnapped by Castro and his men in 1958, right before the revolution. And the reason they were celebrating it is because that event helped put the revolution on the map. And the guy who was kidnapped, Juan Manuel Fangio, who is one of the greatest Formula One racers of all time, he became a spokesperson for the revolution and really celebrated their cause. And every year they commemorate his kidnapping by having a big event. And at that event, they announced that they were going to have the first official car race, basically since that kidnapping, in 6 weeks. And I was there already with a crew because I was working on the making of film.
Right.
And so we decided to, do a very simple film that was going to follow the top drag racers as they were preparing for their race, which was supposed to happen in 6 weeks. And but Welcome to Cuba, where 3 days before the race happened, or was supposed to happen, the Pope announced his visit, and they ended up canceling the race because they said they needed to use all the safety barricades they were going to use for the race for the Pope. So we were told, don't worry, it happened right after the Pope leaves. And so we stuck around another couple weeks, and the Pope left. And once again, we were told, don't worry, it'll happen next week and next week. And we ended up waiting for 4 months for the race to happen. And at that point, it was actually great because we were getting to know the guys and filming with them every day and really getting a connection with our main characters. But there was still no race in sight. And so we decided to come back to New York and start editing what we had shot and, ready to go back to Cuba once the race was going to happen. But 8 months went by and there was still no race. And finally I got a call saying, there might be a race. You might want to come. I can't guarantee it, but it's a good time to come. And so I went back to Cuba, and right when I landed, they told me the race was suspended again. And I really never thought it was going to happen. And without ruining the ending of the film, we definitely got the ending that we were looking for and much more, because we couldn't have asked for a better ending. So once we had captured the ending, it really put everything else in place. And, we had about 300 hours of footage, but because we had that ending, it sort of anchored all the footage into the progression of the film, which was, going to start as a film about competition among these underground drag racers, and really be about who was the fastest racer in Cuba. But it turned into a much bigger picture about, is this race going to happen? Is Cuba changing? How is Cuba changing? What's the relationship between Cuba and the US? And I think we got very lucky with the timing of it, because what's happening now in Cuba, now that the US is open, is very interesting. And I think our film sheds light on it because, yes, a lot of great things are going on in Cuba as a result of these new restrictions being lifted, but there are also a lot of signs of people with access to money now making a lot more than Cubans who don't have access to, resources in Miami or other sort of tourist industries. So it's a fascinating time to be exploring what's going on in Cuba. And I think our film, is really trying to capture the changes going on there.
Yeah, in one way, it really is a tribute to persistence. There are many times when you could have ditched this project because the race is not happening, and staying with it made a difference. But the other kind of major difference is that it gives you, as you were there all that time, you knew the community well. I mean, if you went down and just shot the race and went back, and that's all you had, it would not be the film we have. I've seen so many documentaries that people have shot in Cuba where somebody got to go for a week, and then they sort of look at all these great images, look at this culture, look at these people, and that's all you get. You having spent time there writing, working, living, your connection to the people, to the land, to the culture, and what you reveal is so much deeper than what you otherwise get. I mean, have you seen some of these other documentaries about Cuba? It's kind of a subgenre.
And and no disrespect to them, but I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of documentaries. It's one thing if you're making a film about your culture and you know it well, but if you want to make a film about another culture, and particularly one as rich and complex as Cuban culture, I really feel you have to get to know the place very well. You have to gain people's trust very well. And it's very hard for most filmmakers to think about, well, I'm willing to spend the next year living in a place without even knowing, what how the film is going to turn out and what the ending is going to be. And I've been lucky with a lot of my films because, as long as I wait long enough, I do find an ending. And, I've heard crazy stories about people waiting 8 years and still not really having a story. But I knew, for this film, either the race was going to happen or it wasn't. And that was going to be the end of the film one way or the other, at least, for the time period that I was filming down there. But for me, it was a very special time in my life to be there. And a lot of these racers are close friends. And, they took me in as their horrible Spanish-speaking cousin from New York, and we had a blast together. And I think it's a hard place for foreigners to come in because there aren't that many foreigners living in Cuba, and most foreigners are just there for a week. So Cubans, see them as tourists, and they like them on a superficial level, but they don't really enter their community at all. But for me, it was really important to get to know these guys as intimately as possible. And I think because we spent over a year in Cuba making the film, we were able to join their community, which is really important to me.
Did you ever see a film called Waiting for Fidel? It kind of reminded me of, Waiting for the Race. These two, it's Canadian filmmaker goes down with somebody from the right and the left, and they're supposed to have a meeting with Fidel, and it never happens. So they go around touring the country, and the guy from the left says, look how everything is working. The guy from the right says nothing is working, and they never get the meeting. So in this case,
well, that's exactly, this was going to be like Waiting for Godot and Waiting for, I'm assuming that film also, because I did not think the race, and without revealing the ending again, I never thought what happened was going to happen, because there were no signs that anything was being organized. So we were very lucky to have captured our ending. And I don't know, I might be still filming if it weren't for the ending we got.
So are you somebody who's like always enjoyed car racing and has been around it for a while? Or is this something where you met these guys and kind of got interested in it?
More the latter. I did grow up in North Carolina, which is, the birthplace of NASCAR, and we did have racetracks nearby where I lived, and I always liked cars and I liked racing, but I was never a huge fan. But just seeing these guys and their passion for it, and also the rivalries that developed among them, got me really into the sport. And also, the theme of the film is a lot about how racing should be considered a sport of the people, just like any other sport. And it touches on issues of gambling, of sponsorship, of the amount of money you need in most cases with racing. But in Cuba, these guys, make $20 a month, and they're racing some of the fastest cars in the world with nothing. But it's their love, it's their passion. I'm in Milwaukee right now, and I just took the guys to this junkyard down the street from this interview, and they couldn't believe all the stuff they're being thrown out there, and they're trying to figure out a way how they can just mail this stuff back to their cousins in Miami and then ship it to Cuba one day, because they work with any piece of metal they can find, and they're able to create these incredible racing machines out of them. So yeah, I really love the sport now, because I've learned that it's so much more than just putting the pedal to the metal.
It seems also like that particularly their sort of form of racing is very kind of analog in a digital world. I mean, it's like you use wrenches, you use physical tools, and we live in a world where it's all microprocessors and keyboards. And there's something very beautiful about that evokes that sense of past and like what car culture was at a time, and brings it forward to people who sort of still live that way and sort of do that. And the other thing though is like I just had this image when you're talking about these guys going shopping, like going through security on your way there with all of these metal.
Yeah. Good luck to them. No, I mean, like you said, we spoke at a high school this morning, and someone has said, well, if you had a Ferrari, you know, would you prefer that to your Ford Crown Victoria 56? And PT, the guy with the Ford, he said, of course not, because, you know, I built that car with my two hands, and Ferrari has 1,000 engineers that are building for them, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, these are real mechanics who know every little centimeter of their car inside and out, and it's just amazing what they're able to do with it. And now, you know, it's going to be tricky how because everyone wants to give them parts, and it's too bad it's not a movie about like I don't know, sewing or something where you could put everything in your suitcase. You know, in order to take parts to Cuba, you have to have very special permits, or you have to pay a fortune to go through customs, and so we're going to go to a store now to get, you know, little nuts and bolts and stuff. But it's ¿Quieres venir? Venga. Estoy en la televisión. PT wants to say hi. He's been waiting patiently for me outside. Mira, se llama Bart y estamos en la televisión en Dallas, Texas.
Buenos días.
Sí, gracias. And so estoy explicando la manera que las piezas va a entrar a Miami. Él le encantó la película y el uso de tus manos, porque como tú decías esta mañana, un Ferrari tiene 100,000 ingenieros y tú tienes tus dos manos.
Ok, gracias.
He's saying thank you.
Yeah. So ask him if he likes being in the United States, and how he likes the beer in Milwaukee.
He doesn't drink. He's actually a cancer survivor, but he, ¿cómo te gusta los Estados Unidos?
No, es una oportunidad inolvidable. Me encanta la cultura, las construcciones, de lo antiguo con lo moderno. Hay grandes ciudades, grandes edificios que solo lo había podido ver a través de la televisión, y ahora, gracias a Dios, lo pude conocer, y me encanta intercambiar la cultura con los Estados Unidos.
So he's had a great time here, and because we started in LA, and then we went to Chicago, and now we're in Milwaukee, and a few months ago we were in Detroit showing the film, and he also came to the New York screening at Tribeca last April, and
that's
just
a pretty big deal.
Yeah. So everything about his experience has been, you know, a realization of his dreams, because he's able to, you know, see what he's been watching on TV for many years, and also he loves the exchange of cultures, and everyone loves him. And here's Carlos too, who's one of his biggest rivals, who races the Porsche in the film, and it's his second time coming to a screening. So both of them are very excited to be here. This se llama Bart, es el jefe del festival en Dallas. He wants to come to Dallas, but I don't think you guys can fly them down to Dallas.
Yeah, I unfortunately, I wish we could. Believe me, it would be awesome to have you there. Ask them if, while they're traveling together, they pick up secrets so they can beat each other better.
Cuando estamos juntos, ¿hay secretos para la próxima carrera? Tú estás hablando sobre cosas.
Sí, siempre tratamos de que sea un factor sorpresa. No decimos nunca la última opción que tenemos antes de la hora de correr.
So yeah, he's saying he's building up secrets separate from Carlos, and Carlos won't know anything until the next time they race. But Carlos, he actually just moved to Miami, so. Carlos's mission, because, you know, after a year of living in the U.S., you get residency, and he'll be right back in Cuba once he has residency here. But his mission is to get enough parts in Miami to bring back to Cuba to beat PT the next time.
So ask them if they've seen any car races while they've been here. If they've gone to a NASCAR event or something like that.
¿Miraste carreras aquí en los Estados Unidos?
Lo que quiero es ver una callejera, y no la he podido ver, como las que vemos en Cuba. Vemos un programa que es de ahí, de su estado, que se llama Gas Monkey.
So let me just pause. So he's really wanted to see a drag race, like a street race.
Right.
And he hasn't been able to see it, but he's obsessed with a show that's based in Dallas called Gas Monkeys. They get more TV shows than we do in New York, because every week they get a little thing called a paquete, which is a USB stick that has all the shows from the week before on the stick. So he's very up to date on all the car stuff. But we did go to a race in Detroit. It was an exhibition for ¿qué tipo de carrera en Detroit?
Nissan GTR con un Porsche.
Sí, no, pero en la pista había una
es como de NASCAR.
Yeah, so we went to this NASCAR event in Detroit, and then they also got to race cars from some of the fans after the screening in Detroit, and we did that as well in LA. So they've gotten to test out some pretty fast cars here. Last night they were in a what car were they in last night?
Like a big.
Ayer. ¿Qué tipo de carro?
Era un Pontiac. Pontiac 76.
76 Pontiac that had been tricked out with a lot of powerful stuff.
So ask them which are better, their cars or the ones you've been driving here in the States.
¿Qué prefieres? ¿Tus carros en Cuba o los carros que tú estás manejando aquí?
Se siente la misma sensación porque el auto en Cuba es americano igual y a mí me gusta porque son ruidosos.
So he's saying it's, for him, as long as it's an American car, it's the same feeling. And he's been asked that a few times, and he'll always say that he loves his Ford the most and will never get rid of it. But I think he's, getting to enjoy a lot of different types of cars, but he'll always go back to his Ford.
Aquí son más rápidos.
Here they're a lot faster.
But ask him if you drive the car differently, because on his car he knows every like bolt, every little piece of it, so you have a different level of control. When you're walking into something that somebody else built, is that a different experience?
Cuando tú estás manejando otra carro que no es tuyo, es una experiencia diferente porque tú no sientes todas las cosas que tú sabes muy bien.
Sí, se siente diferente. Aquí hay más condiciones de amortiguación y es impactante. Hay más, la gasolina tiene más octanaje y los carros se sienten un poco más poderosos.
Sí. So yeah, they have all these things that he's not used to, and they have a lot more power. So yeah, it takes them a while to get to know these cars. We went to in LA, they had us test drive Mazda Miatas, which they were really excited about, but then they weren't allowed to go over 25 miles per hour in them. So
why would you be in a Mazda Miata and go 25 miles an hour?
Sí, no cabía.
Sí. Porque en un Miata solamente 25 millas por hora.
Sí, no quepo.
It's sort of like, torture for them.
Yeah, indeed. So
gracias por
he's saying you're very charismatic, and thank you for having them on the show.
Well, so are they. They're totally cool. I wish I had them here. Ask them, one last thing I want to ask them is, being now in the United States for a while, what do they think of food and just sort of the differences of life here? But, food is something that's kind of easy to sort of think about how it's very different. Cuban food, we have this kind of image in our head. But I think
I'm going to ask them so they can respond directly, but I've had a very interesting experience taking them to like fancy restaurants where all the nice sauce is just poured down the drain so they can just get to the potato. And last night we had lamb, which was way too undercooked because they want it, well done. And we had a soup that was, he asked if it was like a shot glass because it was too small of a portion. So yeah, and they've never had anything outside of Cuban food until these trips. So they're very open to trying things, but they'll always go back to their staples. Pero ¿qué piensas sobre la comida aquí en los Estados Unidos?
Wow, me voy a reventar. Quiero comer todo lo que veo y después por la mañana el baño.
I don't know if you understood that, but he's like, wow, this is the food here. It's just changed my life, and I try everything I can get my hands on, and unfortunately, the bathroom every morning suffers from it. But it's true. These guys eat a lot, and I think Carlos has gained 10 pounds since he came here. I'm not kidding.
What about American coffee?
And Carlos hates spicy food. That's true.
Oh. What? He hates spicy food? I thought Cuban
Cubans
food
don't
was
like
spicy.
using spices. In Cuba, you know, Cuban food in the U.S. has a lot of spices, but not in Cuba.
That's
Lo que más hay es ajo y cebolla.
There's more garlic and onion in Cuba, but they don't use spices.
oh.
Mostly because, you know, they don't have the same sort of options for ingredients. And I think in the 50s there were a lot of spices, but now there aren't as many.
How about Cuban coffee, American coffees? You gotten used to that?
That's a very good question too. PT doesn't drink coffee. Every morning I have to find Carlos a glass of milk with just a little drop of coffee, which is café con leche in Cuba.
Café con leche, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Cuban coffee is like
So, yeah, so he has to, like, if he doesn't have that, I mean, we had to get on the way to the high school. Carlos doesn't function well with without his café con leche and a little slice of ham.
Es rico, lo que a mí me lo suspendieron.
No, he loved it, but he can't eat it now because of his illness. Or drink it, sorry.
So ask them if they're going to miss being in the States when they have to go back.
¿Vas a extrañar los Estados Unidos?
Sí, no, mucho. Espero ver pronto.
He's gonna miss it a lot, but the good news is he's gonna be here for the next month because we're gonna show it in Miami in October, which is gonna be very exciting because we have a lot of their families there. He has some cousins in Miami that he's gonna stay with and maybe get some work there for the next few weeks. But yeah, he's been here now for about 2 months total because he stayed for a month after Tribeca and he's in heaven here. He's having a good time. But he has, you know, he'll always go back to Cuba. His wife and child are in Cuba. His son just started medical school. So, you know, he wants to be there for that. And same with Carlos. Carlos is living here for the next several months, but he plans to return once he gets his residency because, as most of you know, Cuba's probably the only country where if you make it to the U.S., you can get U.S. Residency here after a year of living here. And so most Cubans, once they've gotten their residency, they go back and forth, which gives them a lot more economic opportunities.
So, yeah, could you talk a little bit about this whole thing then? I mean, you spent a lot of time there. How hard is it to get to Cuba? After people watch this film, they're going to want to come and spend more time.
Now it's very easy. I mean, you can't go and say you're smoking cigars and drinking rum, but if you have, you know, if any profession, if you can say you're doing research on that profession, and it's very easy to say that because every profession, you know, has something related to Cuba. So if you're a marine biologist, you can go and say you're studying sharks. If you're a painter, you can say you're studying artists. If you're a filmmaker, you can say, you know, you're studying Cuban film. And that's a very easy way of getting there 100% legally. You can also go for cultural reasons, for religious reasons, for educational reasons. And it's you know, I think there's 12 different categories that allow people to go to Cuba now. And I think people are afraid because it's still not technically 100% legal and you're not supposed to go there just as a tourist. But who wants to go there just as a tourist? I think it's much more exciting to try to get to know the culture as much as possible and hopefully experience something outside of just the hotels and the tour buses that, you know, are now populating. So yeah, I'm encouraging everyone to see Cuba now while all these changes are happening because
before McDonald's takes over.
Yeah.
And was it hard to get visas for these guys to come here?
Yes. Unfortunately, the other characters weren't able to get visas. The only reason Carlos could get a visa was because his wife was already a resident here, and PT was the one guy we had the most luck with, where he got his visa through the Tribeca Film Festival. So he's allowed to come in and out for the next 5 years with that visa, and we're trying to get 3 of the other characters to come to the festival in Miami the same way, but they've already been rejected once, so I'm not that hopeful. But yeah, it's very difficult because you know people are worried they're going to stay in the U.S. So if they come up with any reason why they think they might stay, then they'll deny their visa. But since PT has his family back there, and since he's, you know, going through treatment there, he just had 22 rounds of chemo before coming here. So they sort of, I think they know that he'll come back to Cuba. Well, hopefully others will be here though.
Thank you guys for hanging out. I mean, what a
Thank you.
pleasure to get all three of you. I mean, really, it made
Encantado
it.
de verlo con
Gracias.
Chao.
Thank you. Go see the
Gracias.
film.
So see the
Enjoy.
film. It'll be Sunday, October 18th at the Angelica Film Center. And Sunday's an awesome day. And look, for those of you watching this, don't you want to see these guys in the film? It's like, yes, of course you do. And as great as they are, their cars are even better. It's going to be totally awesome. So thank you guys so much. Great talking to you. Thank you. This was a joy. This was so much fun.
I love it. All right. Take care, Bart. Thank
All right,
you.
bye.